We are going to turn this skull into a concrete skull planter. The idea behind this project was simple enough. Buy some plastic skulls and make some concrete skull planters using the plastic skulls as molds. My mold is leaking, so I need something to hold like that much silicone. But of course, in total Panarchy fashion, the execution was anything but simple. I really wanted to find a way to reduce the cost for this project. My thought was that if I used the plastic skulls as molds, then I would have to purchase a new one every time I wanted to make a concrete skull. So I decided, in my infinite wisdom, that my best course of action was to make a silicone mold of the plastic skull that I could reuse over time. Little did I know at the time, but I was so very wrong. The first thing I needed to do was make a box to contain the silicone as it solidifies around the skull. I measured the skull and based on its measurements cut plexiglass to make an 8x8 box. At this point in time, I thought the worst thing to happen during this project was the fact that I ran out of plexiglass during this step. Well, now at least I have the 4 sides and had to craft an additional side with foam board covered in packing tape, which works very well, by the way. But I was so very wrong. Thankfully, I did correct one mistake before it occurred, and I noticed that I would be a little bit short on silicone prior to pouring it and ordered more. Sadly, this was the only thing I was right about. More right than I wanted to be. Before I poured the silicone, I hot glued any holes that I could see in the skull to prevent the silicone from going inside the plastic skull. I hot glued the skull upside down in the box, thinking that if this would leave a hole in the top of the skull where I could put a cup in when I'm pouring concrete to make the planter portion of the skull. You'll understand what I mean later on. Then I mixed and poured the silicone in small batches until I covered the skull. Or at least that was my plan. I developed a small leak in my box early on, but this was easily fixed with packing tape. Then as I continued to mix and pour the silicone into the box, I became keenly aware that despite my best attempts to have enough silicone for this project, there wasn't gonna be enough. The footage you are about to see is real evidence of a crafter losing her shit and panicking over a project. I should warn you, this part is frightening and you may want to close your eyes and usher any little ones out of the room. Josh! Come here! I don't have enough to cover the bottom of it. So my thought was if I dumped it out
into
something else,
and flip it,
and then it would cover the top exactly how I want. So I need something to hold like that much silicone. Ah! I won't be able to glue it down now.
Have a rock?
I have lots of rocks.
It's okay. You just flip it and put a weight on it.
I don't think that's gonna work.
I like how it just naturally wants to be the other way. You'll be fine.
I can't move.
Yeah, I know.
Because it's only got like 30 minutes of...
I'll find
I don't think I have a big enough rock, Justin. This is like coming up. It's not gonna work.
If you get something heavy enough, it will.
This is a disaster. I just don't think it's gonna work. No.
Okay, well, this is a flat top. So now we need to hold that in place long enough until we can rig something up to stabilize it.
Do you want gloves?
We are past that now, aren't we?
Do you want gloves?
We are past that now, aren't we?
I might cry.
Or it's so crazy it just might work.
Is it over? Thank Morticia that's done. I'm gonna have nightmares for a week. But you know, I find it personally best to follow my horror binge sessions with some light humor.
Was because it's literally inside. Oh, it's in there good.
Oh my god! Now that my mold is complete, let's move on to what you've all been waiting for, the concrete pour. I decided it might be best to use the plastic skull as a mold as well during this, so we could see the difference between the two. So I spent a quick minute removing the top portion of the plastic skull so that I could pour concrete into it. Now to the garage! I created a space in the garage to mix and pour the concrete. Then popped open the bag of concrete I bought last year for these types of projects. I have the wrong kind of concrete. Then after a quick trip to the hardware store, I was finally ready to mix and pour. You may have noticed that my silicone mold has a hole in the top and bottom of it. So I set it on a melamine board, hoping that it would create enough of a seal on the bottom of it so that the concrete wouldn't come out of that area. I sprayed the inside of the silicone mold with water. After an amusing birthing of the plastic skull from the mold, I wanted to make sure the concrete would release easier from the mold.
And you want to do that again with concrete.
And from what I read online, this was the way to go. Then I used cooking spray to coat the inside of the plastic skull and the outside of 2 cups to act as mold release for them. I didn't use the cooking spray on the silicone because from what I've read, it can apparently break down the material. I used some Pam cooking spray, ironic I know, to act as a mold release for the plastic pieces, and I knew this would work from previous concrete experiments that I've done with my dad. And I know I said it was time before, but now it's finally time to mix and pour the concrete. I swear it's finally time this time. There will be no more distractions, no more side quest. We are done and ready to go. I promise. The concrete I used was a quick set concrete, and it started to firm up fairly quickly after mixing. So I ended up only mixing small batches at a time, so it wouldn't harden up too much before I could transfer it into the molds. I found this was also beneficial to keep the cups in the top of the skulls because the concrete had already begun to set around them. So I didn't need to weigh down the cups to keep them in the molds. Then I waited. But only one day, because I am incredibly impatient. Demolding wasn't too difficult. I actually found it was easier than taking the plastic skull out of the silicone, and probably because the concrete is, of course, heavier, and I could just push with my knee on one side and pop it out the other opening. The plastic skull, of course, I had to cut it open with the Dremel in order to get the concrete out. I was disappointed to find that my skulls were mildly deformed. Granted, I kind of dug how creepy they looked. Perfect for spooky season. But because they weren't exactly what I wanted and I still had my molds, I decided to make more. I even taped the plastic skull back together with duct tape to see if I could reuse it. Then I mixed and poured the concrete, being careful to pack more concrete around the faces of the molds. to create a better cast. And this time I also used bigger cups for the planter part. And I also used the same technique for mold release as I did the first time. This time I was a little bit more patient and I waited 2 whole days before removing the concrete from the molds. And oh my, am I happy with how they turned out. Oh, that's cool. I did, however, notice a couple of differences between the silicone molded skull and the plastic molded skull. The silicone mold did have a better cast of the original skull, but did have some sort of strange discoloration over the skull surface, which you can see here. I'm not entirely sure why this happened because I'm not that well versed in concrete. The only thing I can think of is just how it's set in the silicone. And the other huge difference is that one of these skulls costs 10 times less than the other one. Can you guess which one it was? So here's my advice. Buy plastic skulls and turn them into molds. You can even reuse them if you're very careful. Don't be like me and think that by making a giant silicone mold of a plastic skull is going to save you money. Thanks so much for watching. If you like skulls as much as I do, watch this video next. My name is Pam and this is Total Pamarchy, the craft channel with a little anarchy. Until next time, bye.